on WhatsApp now on 0345 60 60 973.
I'll talk in just a moment with Lewis Goodall, presenter of Sundays with Lewis Goodall and co-host of Global's podcasts and news agents. You know, they're in the States this week, have been in Minneapolis and have head to Washington. Let's remind ourselves, shall we, of that pretty challenging clip that we played earlier on of the California Governor Gavin Newsom speaking to Sky News, asked whether he had a message for Europe over the handling of you-know-who, Donald Trump.
It's time to get serious and stop being complicit. It's time to stand tall and firm, have a backbone. I've seen this in the United States, the supine Congress playing both sides, saying one thing on a text or a tweet and another publicly.
Should Europe respond with
principles. It's time to stand tall and strong.
Does that mean responding with
tariffs? It's time to stand united. You make that determination. I don't make that determination.
But when you say standing tall, what do you mean?
I can't take this complicity. People rolling over. I should have brought a bunch of knee pads for all the world leaders. I mean, handing out crowns and this is pathetic. Nobel Prizes, they are being given away. I mean, it's just pathetic. And I hope people understand how pathetic they look on the world stage. I mean, at least from an American perspective, it's embarrassing.
So what should Europe be doing?
You should decide, the Europeans should decide for themselves what to do. But one thing they can't do is what they've been doing. And they've been playing. This guy is playing folks for fools. And it's embarrassing.
Europeans think this is diplomacy and this will ultimately
this is
work.
Diplomacy with Donald Trump? He's a T-Rex. You mate with him or he devours you. One or the other.
And Europe's being
people
devoured?
need to stand. No, the Europeans could be if they continue down this path and process. They need to stand tall, stand firm, stand united. Look, you said this a year ago. We should have been having this conversation, and they didn't.
Lewis, you know what I thought when I first heard that? I thought this is the slick high school jock telling the classy Europeans what they should and shouldn't be doing. I mean, he's in a very different position, isn't he, to the people in Davos at the moment, the Europeans in Davos.
Well, Europe is waking up this morning, Sheila, to basically being called completely pathetic from both sides of the political divide in the United States, Donald Trump and Gavin Newsom. And you know what? In their own respective ways, they're kind of right. The reason that we are in this position, the reason that European leaders, even the more truculent ones like Emmanuel Macron, are bending the knee to Donald Trump is because we haven't listened to Donald Trump. We haven't listened to him for the best part of a decade now, when it has been painfully clear, arguably even preceding his presidency, that the United States was in a initially slow, but now extremely rapid disengagement and indeed battering of the security alliance, 8-decade security alliance, which has underpinned our security in the West for 80 years, as I say. And I don't think it makes any sense any longer to even talk about the West, to even talk about the United States as being an ally in the way that we have known it in the past. We can't talk about it being an ally militarily because it's threatening to invade European sovereign territory. We can't talk about it as an ally strategically because increasingly it takes the side of Russia over European nations. We can't talk about it being an ally culturally because we've seen via the national security document strategy that was published just a few weeks ago that the Americans believe that the Europeans are decadent, declining, facing, in their words, civilizational erasure. We've seen that the Trump administration actively wants to back hard-right forces within European countries who want to destroy mainstream centre-left and centre-right parties. And we definitely can't talk about it as an ally any longer economically, because every single week that goes past, we wake up to the latest fit of frenzy from the president and discover that tariffs are either being imposed or threatening to be imposed. So this is a reordering of the order that we've known for decades now.
And that word ally used to come with so many certainties, and you've outlined very clearly where those certainties have been shattered, and you're right, they have been shattered. And yet there are still voices in NATO and in the EU saying that the alliance still exists. Just about, I would say. What would you say?
I think that it is hard You might be right, Sheila. You might be just about still there, but I think it's very hard to really talk about NATO as being a credible force at the moment. That's not to say it might not be again under a different president, but who would want to bet right now? When you consider, you and I have talked about it before, NATO is basically an 80-year-old confidence trick. It is the idea that when it comes to the crunch, that you can't put a cigarette paper between the security interests of the smallest member to the largest member, that we were all operating under a common security umbrella. Does anybody from the Kremlin to Downing Street to the Elysee Palace to Kyiv to Washington, the White House, seriously believe that right now? And even if there is the slightest crack of doubt, the slightest slither of suspicion that might not be the case, then the house of cards that is NATO collapses. I mean, just consider, Sheila, just over the last, while I've been in Washington overnight, just consider what Donald Trump has done in a single evening while most of the world was asleep. I sort of made a few notes of it earlier because it's so dizzying. Fresh from a college football final in Miami, he announced that Vladimir Putin was going to be invited onto the so-called Gaza Board of Peace. That's as Russian missiles were hitting apartment blocks in Kyiv overnight. Irony isn't just dead, it's 6 foot under. Next up, Trump threatened a 200% tariff on wine and champagne after Emmanuel Macron declined to join his board, saying that he would force him to join by a threat of tariffs. By 1 a.m, Trump was posting AI images of himself planting an American flag on Greenland and unveiling maps when the US owned Canada and Venezuela. Trump then said Greenland is imperative for global security, threatened Keir Starmer, calling UK's decision over Diego Garcia an act of great stupidity, and even went on to sum it up saying, just because someone went to Greenland over 500 years ago doesn't mean they own it, which may well come as news to, I suppose, the entire history of the United States of America.
Exactly. And the US president that signed a piece of paper that said that Greenland has gone.
Indeed.
Tell me this, these messages that we see these days, largely because Donald Trump reveals them, but these messages from Mark Rutte and from Emmanuel Macron, for example, I won't read them all, but finishing with can't wait to see you, yours, Mark. He of Daddy fame last time around. And
love you,
miss you, want you.
Love you, babe.
Macron's finishes with let's have a dinner together in Paris together on Thursday. That sounds nice. Before you go back to the US, Emmanuel. But both of them say, particularly Macron, amongst other things, I really don't get what you're doing over Greenland. Can we talk about that, please? It was just an odd text.
It is, as the French would say, Sheila, a cri de coeur, right? It is simply a sort of acknowledgement of the complete confusion and bewilderment that European leaders are experiencing. They are trying to solve an unsolvable puzzle, Sheila, which is, what do you do with a problem like Donald Trump? What do you do when a leader of the United States, a country which is at the centre of, as I say, an 8-decade-old, very successful security relationship, goes rogue? And the answer to that question is that there is no answer, because for good or ill, and right now it's clear that it is ill, we are so embedded, our security and economic relationships are so interwoven with the United States, we have become so dependent on the United States, Donald Trump is right about that he and they call the shots. Now, we were reasonably sanguine about that arrangement when we trusted and had faith that even presidents like George W. Bush, that perhaps Europeans weren't that fond of, still had fundamental security and cultural alignment with Europe. That is clearly no longer the case. And therefore, it is simply the case that European leaders have no choice right now but to try on any given day to persuade Donald Trump not to indulge in his worst instincts. But just bear this in mind, Sheila. As I say, I'm in Washington, D.C. right now. I was here a year ago for the inauguration of Trump for his second term. We are only 1/4, 25% through Donald Trump's second term. When you consider the extraordinary tsunami of politics that has enveloped the United States during the Trump presidency, at home and abroad, the changes that he is auguring, it is dizzying. Consider what he might yet do in the remaining 3/4 of his term. So it might well be that Macron or Keir Starmer or whoever it is get to Davos and manage to defuse this particular Trump bomb today. But what about tomorrow and the day after that and the year after that and the year after that as well? That is the constant firefighting that European leaders are having to engage in, the trench political warfare with the guy who's supposed to be the guarantor of European security.